Hey, it's Nath here, and welcome to another edition of Pulp Culture Plus. With me this week is Benji Bajorek, who is a Melbourne-based comic writer and illustrator, known for his bold and genre-driven storytelling across horror, sci-fi, and crime noir, and also a bit of an adventure. A true independent creator, he often takes on multiple roles in his projects, writing, illustrating, and lettering in his own works. His current Kickstarter is in full effect with Troubleshoot. Please welcome to the show, Benji.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Benji, so maybe I've given you a bit of a spiel. Is all of that correct? And is there anything else that you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so my comics include, in chronological order, History of Monsters, The Flower, Deadsheet, History of Monsters 100-page special, The Unknown Road, and my current project is Troubleshoot, which is a sequel to Deadsheet.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've been doing this for a short period of time. It's probably been about 10 years-ish or less than that.
Less. So I started putting comics out in late 2019. Really slapped together zines. None of them are available anymore for good reason. Because lockdown kind of saved me. I thought I was doing my best work, and then lockdown stopped me from doing any tablet events. So I ended up working on the History of Monsters, which was the big story that I never thought I would do, because I never thought I would have the skill level. And then, having 2 years to just develop over this 300-page epic really gave me the education I needed in making comics. So, I love that book, but you look at it, it's 300 pages, and the first issue looks nothing like the last issue, because I was really learning as I went. And then, late 2019, early 2020 was when I really started taking it seriously, and just haven't stopped since then. But I've been writing for over a decade. Yeah. I always thought I was going to be writing prose or writing comics and getting other people to illustrate, but I've been writing since I was a kid, so yeah. Yeah,
that's fantastic. What sort of made you think I'm going to do a comic?
All-Star Comics. The idea that you could make your own comics was never a thing for me until I started. I came into All-Star the week they opened, not realising it was a new store. Someone mentioned there was a shop on Queen Street, Lonsdale Street, and I popped in and met Mitch and Troy, and then, their local section took off, and it was always in the back of my mind because I knew I always wanted to write something. But yeah, drawing was I was too lazy for it. I didn't have the patience for it. I wanted to write, and then I'd put it off because I could just never figure out how to get the funds together to get someone to draw comics, because I was too busy going to the pub with mates. Priorities. Yeah. So it's always been on the back burner. But yeah, if it wasn't for the local section at All-Star Comics, then I wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah. So you're talking about local talent. Is there any influences there, local talent that sort of helped to push you? Is there a book that you read, or was there a couple of artists or writers that sort of come to mind at all? Or
honestly, it's off the top of my head right now. I can't remember a name. There was one book, a black and white horror comic. The name escapes me, but that was something. But also, it was around the time Jess Parker was working here, and I really enjoyed her work. And there was also a project that never really came to fruition that I was really excited for, and it was kind of the kind of comic that I wish someone was going to make. And when that project fell through, it sort of led me to making my own stuff, because I really wanted that comic to exist, and so I decided to write my own sort of version of it, and that's sort of what led to the History of Monsters. It was more just the idea of the self-publishing and realizing that you can just put something together. It doesn't have to be the most amazing produced work. As long as there's a story there, you can. Literally, my first comic I stocked here was just a few folded pieces of A4 paper that I printed on the sneak.
Well, you've got to start somewhere, right? Yeah, and that's what it's about. I've done a few comic panels, at cons, and published books myself. And one thing that gets asked a lot is how do I start? How do I get into comics? And I think my answer for most people, which is exactly what you've done, is just start somewhere. And it doesn't matter how you start. Once you start, then you'll get the bug, or you'll realise that it's not for you. But one way or another, at least you've done something that not a lot of people have done, and I think that's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, one of my biggest, two of the things that sort of really led me to drawing my own comics as well. So I'm a huge fan of Brian Michael Bendis. I grew up reading Ultimate Spider-Man, but then as an adult reading his indie stuff, especially the black and white, and seeing how he, with limited skill, was using photography and collage and illustration and a mixture of mediums to make his black and white indie comics. And I could look at, I can't do a Jim Lee comic, but I could do a Bendis comic kind of thing. But also I listen to your podcast, I listen to a million comics podcasts, and you hear creators get that question, like, how do I get into comics? And it always seems to come from a place of, can you give me a shortcut? But the creators always say, like, no, just make a comic, and that's how you get into it. But Bendis's book on making comics, Words for Pictures, there's a section there with is it Diane or Diana Schutz from Dark Horse Comics?
Yep.
And she says, no one likes being handed a script. If you can put together a comic, even if it's really poorly drawn, but you've written it and can show that you can complete a project, that's all we want to see. And that really inspired me, because I'm like, well, I can't draw well, but I can definitely put together a story, and I know how to lay out a page, I know how the storytelling works. And then that just led to, I never wanted to draw, and now it's all I'm doing.
Yeah, but I mean, and you say that you don't draw well, but your books are selling, which means that you do have an audience, and those people see you for more than what you obviously see for yourself. I mean, as creatives, we are probably our worst critic, and we can be like brutally hard on ourselves, with no filter, and obviously that can stifle the creative process at times. When you get into that sort of that, and everybody does, what's sort of your go-to? How do you sort of get out of that rut? How do you change your mentality or your process?
I get obsessed with anything I love. Like I really, like, I'm a fan. Everything I love, I sort of don't dabble in a lot of things. Like, a perfect example is, like, I'll never get into Star Trek. I'll never get into Doctor Who, because I'm an absolute completist, and I love to be totally obsessed with the thing I like, and that's just overwhelming. So there's things that I'm just leave aside, and I focus on what I love. And with comics, I just need to get it done. I need to finish it. And I have this horrible, like, Groundhog Day curse of just like, I just got to finish this project, and then I can have a break, and then I can relax and play some video games. But then there's always the next project, and there's never an end. But I think the difference with me is, because I don't view myself as an artist, I view myself as a writer. I have this conversation all the time with artists who, they draw for fun. They do fan art, they do things like sketches, doodles, they go get a coffee and they're sketching, they're on the train. I don't do that. Like, I purely do it just to get the story done. And that's the difference. So I don't view illustration as fun, so I don't view myself as an artist. It's all part of the writing process in some weird way in my head, and that's how I justify it. So I do get into a rut, but it's just, I have to finish it. I have to finish what I start, and that's how I get out of it. So
would you say that you're a storyteller with an illustration component?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's all part. That's the thing with comics, right? Is you always see that argument pop up online, like, what's more important, the writer or the artist? And it's like, no, it's the same. It's one and the same. It's a visual medium, and people forget that. And the writers forget that, artists forget that, but it all works together. It's all part of telling the story. But it can be hit and miss, right? I mean, we've had this conversation on the show before. Like you say, if you're reading a really great comic but the artwork's really poor, how long do you continue it? And vice versa. If the artwork's really good but the storyline is really poor, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Yeah. But I think you're right. I think if you're one way or another, if you're enjoying whatever side of it is, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, and one thing I will say is, I have developed as an artist where I can be proud of the things I draw, but the one thing I can feel confident in myself saying is I know how to lay out a comic page. That's one thing. There are amazingly talented artists that can draw the most incredibly detailed things, but I'll open up a comic and I don't know where to look on the page, and there's word balloons everywhere, and it's just this is a mess. And that is now I've gotten to the point now that I didn't used to see that, you know, and now when I've started making comics, I'm starting to see how the eye flows across the page and things like that. So when I pick up a book off the shelf, it's not really necessarily the plot or the art itself that grabs me. It's the flow. Like, does it capture my eye? Does it make me want to continue? And I think that's so important. You can be a very unskilled illustrator, but if you can lay out a page in a way that's eye-catching, I think that is stronger. So that's where, you know, the argument about art is different, because it's not just about skill and detail of illustration. It's telling a story. You know, it's the same. You'd be editing with a film. You know, a very beautifully, you know, big budget film can be made, but if it's poorly edited, it's not interesting to watch.
Yeah, no. So with your creativity, you've self-published some of your books, and some books have that you've put on Kickstarter. You've currently got a Kickstarter at the moment, which is a sequel to Deadsheet. Maybe tell us a little bit about that and where that this news story came from. Because I think you've confessed yourself that you were it was going to be a one and done, and then you weren't going to move on with that. And obviously there's been something that's been gnawing away in your brain there. So maybe give us a little bit about, you know, the new book, and then tell us about how, you know, the Kickstarter process.
Yeah, Deadsheet was such a funny book. Like, I actually quit making it a few times while I was making it. And then, you know, I had some positive reinforcement from people who read it and said, no, this is good, and just had some advice, and finished it, and that was my first Kickstarter, and that went well, and it was all just flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't know what this book was. And then I was really happy with it, but I liked the sort of, I want to say ambiguous ending, but I just liked that it had this ending that was sort of, you could interpret, and I liked that it didn't answer all the questions. And I think that's important. Like, I think a lot of, you know, there's the Wolverine's origin, there's midichlorians, there's all these things where getting the answer doesn't necessarily make make the story good. The mystery is half the entertainment.
Absolutely.
So I didn't want to build too much on it, because I didn't want to ruin a good book. But then in 2024 it was nominated and then won the Comic Arts Awards of Australia, which I did not see coming.
Yeah, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
It was a great win.
Yeah, it was the most nervous night of my life, because I was sitting there and they kept announcing these nominees. I'm like, someone's pranked me. And I haven't won anything. And it was the very last one. I'd been an empty stomach, and I'd just been nursing this beer, and I'm just like, what is, and then suddenly I have to give a speech. It was, and then, you know, and then the end of the night, I ended up sleeping on a park bench at the airport because I didn't get to fly. It was a whole experience. Like, it was so strange. But
that sounds like a comic.
Oh yeah, it was seriously, like, I'm literally sitting there with my award, like, huddled on a park bench. But anyway, so getting that award and then realizing, because, you know, especially with self-publishers, you don't often hear back. Like, the book sells, and then the store calls you and says, hey, we need more stock. But I find when people hate something, they'll tell you, but when they like something, they're content. So you don't really hear back. So this was the first time really hearing that people enjoyed the book, and it got the sort of my mind flowing. I'm like, oh, do I want to revisit it? And then the other factor was when I got to meet The Prodigy, who were my favourite band, and their music was a huge influence on Deadsheet. And I got to sort of present them with copies, and that was an amazing experience. And then that just sort of made me think, like, oh, you know, maybe, do I want to revisit this? And then, like, life is always full circle. So the thing that really led to the creation of Deadsheet was not only lockdown, but I had to move house during lockdown, and I ended up living a floor above one of the worst human beings imaginable, and that's where the idea really came from.
If I had a spreadsheet,
oh, tell me about it.
It's the old list, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yeah,
everyone has that list.
Yeah, or, you know, there's the Button, the Richard Matheson story. Like, there's always those stories. And he was a nightmare, and it was just, you know, living in almost fear sometimes. And then eventually moved away, but the story came from that. The same thing happened early last year. I got the notice to vacate, and then suddenly was scrambling, looking for a new place to live. And then, again, ended up living next to an even worse person. And it's been, so funnily enough, full circle moment, as of this conversation, the tenant is moving out. Should be moving out next week, which is also when the Kickstarter ends. But funnily enough, this, like, moving to this place and dealing with this neighbour is what led to Troubleshoot. And getting some new ideas of, like, okay, what happens after Nina discovers this disc and all that. But I think the big difference with this project was my last book and my last Kickstarter, The Unknown Road, was a, you know, totally different project. It was a full color high fantasy book. That was the hardest I've ever worked on something. It took me 2 years. It was full color. It was my first full color book. I struggled through that, and then I was working on it through the move, and it was just this thing that would never end. And I just hated the experience of making that book because it was just me alone. And I did dabble in some collaboration with my History of Monsters 100-page special, where I built relationships with some artists over my short period making comics, that I thought, well, because that book was like a throwback sort of 1970s style horror anthology, I thought I'll get some artists, do some pin-ups, see how that goes. Got a variant cover from an artist I love, and that really sort of, because I always had a fear of collaboration, the idea of someone doing something of yours, the ownership of it, thing like that classic paranoia. But then with the Troubleshoot, I decided I did not want to make this book alone, and I wanted to change the format of the storytelling, because all the ideas I had were these, like, what do you call them, vignettes?
Shorter stories that would help to sort of carry the larger story together, right?
Yeah, that's it. And because they were each, like, one of them is sort of a flat out comedy, like a black comedy, but they're also totally different, that I thought there's no way I can draw this and keep it consistent and blend them together. So I thought I'll make my own sort of anthology, and find different artists to match those styles. And what was really fun about that was not only some of the artists I already knew that carried over from History of Monsters. So Hoshi, I discovered her by buying just a random zine in Japan while I was there, and got in contact to do a pin-up, and just have been in contact ever since. And then Johnson Benjamin, so he got in touch with me with the Deadsheet Kickstarter, and he loved that book, and it's one of those rare occasions where someone liked a thing you've done, and not only did they like it, but they absolutely got everything I was trying to do. Because some people can misinterpret your intentions, but we just have gelled ever since. He is a writer-artist as well, and we just love the same comic creators and manga and films, and we have been in touch, I want to say, every day since Deadsheet, which is really funny, because he lives up in the Mississippi in the States, like. So, and I don't think either of us even know what time it is when we're talking to each other, but just constantly back and forth. So knowing these artists, it was really fun to not just get them to draw something of mine, but to write something for them. And so it kind of set me free in a sense of, like, I'm always writing for myself and writing for my inability. So it was really exciting to write for someone's ability. Hone in on the anime and manga influence. I wanted to find artists who could do that. And that led me to conventions gaming and anime conventions that I've never gone to. And just finding this whole new world of creators who, don't necessarily know you can self-publish comics. Just kind of doing stuff for the fun of it.
Well, that's the beauty of the digital age, right? I mean, back in the day, it was very expensive, and the technology just really wasn't there. A lot of it was done by hand, and then you would have to know a printer. It was a very expensive exercise to get everything printed. Now with the digital age, you can either self-publish yourself, do it at home, or the expense of getting a short run is very cost effective for it. And I think that's one of the great things about the digital age now with collaboration as well, is that and we see this obviously with the sort of the bigger companies, where you don't have to be in the same country or in the same office as somebody to be able to collaborate really well, and some of these really good, tight, collaborative teams. One's in South America and one's in the US, or one's in Japan and one's over in Australia. So we have that, that opportunity and that fortunate space to be able to, like you say, if you're gelling with somebody and it works really well, then, it's kind of limitless, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I was baffled at that when I would listen to interviews with, comic book writers and artists I liked, and they would say, yeah, I've never even met the artist I'm working with. I'm like, what do you mean? But now it's the same thing, where I've got friendships with people I've never even actually spoken to. It's all just messaging, and it's such a strange experience, but it's like, I kind of forget about it because it is so positive. And this whole project has just been like, just exploring and finding new artists. And then even though this book is done and ready for print, and I'm just waiting for the Kickstarter to be funded, I'm still looking for artists just for the fun of it, just because it's not just about, I want you to draw my next project. It's about finding people who are like-minded, because I have I've got this funny list of notes in my phone. That first I went to the Game Expo early last year, looking for a manga artist, and I saw when I went on the Artist Alley listings for that, I thought, oh, there's heaps of people here doing anime fan art and stuff like that. I'll find someone. I'm walking through and I'm sort of looking and I'm finding some really cool art, but then that interaction with the person was a little awkward, or they might have been a bit too pushy or standoffish. You know, there was one guy who just looking at his phone, and I was like, "Hey man, how's it going?" He's just like looks up at me and looks down at his phone again. I'm like, "All right, sweet."
There's always one. There's always one.
And then it was like literally the end of I did the whole walk.
Yep.
And I came to this one last artist, and it was Steph, who's on the book, and she was just really easy to talk to. One of the only artists there who mentioned, I asked everybody, do you have goals to do any sequential art, or are you just focusing on prints? And she was the only one to say, I've had this comic idea for a while, but I just kind of haven't gotten around to it. And it was just, and we had a conversation. I looked at her stuff, walked around again, and I just kept mulling it over. And so I've got this list of sort of experiences in my phone of just this person was rude, this person was rude. And then with Steph, I just had this one line that says, really nice, really easy to talk to, really cool art. And that's what I'm looking for, is just that combination, because you don't want a bad experience. You could get an incredible artist, but then it could be a horrible experience.
Look, and there's plenty of stories about that we hear all the time. So tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter. So this is your third Kickstarter? Is a fourth Kickstarter? Yeah. Sorry, my apologies. Definitely not doing you justice there with your veteranship of kickstarting. So tell us about the process. Why Kickstarter, and how it's going so far.
Deadsheet was just my first experience. So again, like I said, I just didn't know what I was doing, and it was funded within the first couple of days, and then doubled by the end of it, and it did really well. I got the hang of it. The second one was a learning experience because I was overconfident. I was kind of relying on sort of the additional talent. So Rebecca Isaacs did a variant cover for that, who I was a big fan of from her work on Berserker One Shot. And I didn't make any effort with the advertising for that. I didn't do any kind of branding. I just kind of thought, hey everyone, you backed Deadsheet, now back this book. And I've got some cool people involved. And I remember getting some messages from people like, hey, do you have any graphics that I can repost? And I was like, oh wow, I haven't done anything for this project. And I really it got funded by the end, but I really learned no, you can't just rely. And then talking to other people who have done Kickstarters, I got some advice. They said, you think you're going to carry over the people from the last one, but people don't back the creator, they back the project. And because I jump from genre to genre, people aren't necessarily going to be interested. So then with The Unknown Road, I did the total opposite again, where I did zero. With Kickstarter, you've got all the bells and whistles, your rewards, your prints and things like that. Didn't do any of that. I just had the book and a little mini zine. And that project got funded in 24 hours, doubled by the end. It was a great experience, but I made way more effort with the branding and I love that I'm gesturing for an audio medium. Sorry.
Fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I just kind of just focused on making sure that it was a visually appealing campaign.
It's really interesting because what you're saying there, I mean, it goes back to a saying that somebody said to me very, very early on in my career with comics, and it was that you're only as good as your last project. And we see that a lot, with we might have a really good collaborative team, they separate and they go on and do another project, and then we don't hear from them for quite a large period of time. And that's obviously because either the collaborative team doesn't work or people aren't picking it up because it's a different genre. There's lots of different reasons why. So it's good that, obviously that self-reflection with you can sort of see that obviously Kickstarter's not just about slapping something on there and hoping for the best, that there is a level of work that needs to be done to get your book across the line. Yeah,
absolutely. And one other thing I did wrong with History of Monsters was I thought launching it in the lead up to Halloween, because it was a horror book, I thought that would be a clever marketing choice, but turns out it was the opposite because everyone thought the same thing.
Yeah.
So there was this influx of monster themed books, and mine just got lost to the mix of it. And again, luckily got funded, but it was it was a learning experience. And so with this one, I was sort of able to take all that, but so it hasn't been funded. I am surprised mainly because there are artists involved that are way more talented than me. I was able to get one of my favorite artists of all time, Nicholas Draper Ivey, who worked on Static at DC, to do the cover. and all these just different range of people with different followings to work on this book. And I will say proudly, like, it's the best thing I've ever written, and it's one of the best looking books, and I'm allowed to say that because I didn't draw all of it. But again, timing. So there's this influx of amazing Kickstarters at the moment. There's the Tyrant Kickstarter, which just is incredible. There's the Matteo Scalera one. The title I'm forgetting, but it's another sort of like very moody black and white type story. And then the opposite end, you've got the G.I. Joe one. You've got all these big campaigns.
G.I. Joe Compendium that's happening at the moment. You've got Angie Spicer, who's an Australian artist as well, and writer. And I think you're right. I think it's about timing. It's looking at those windows, and there's a little bit of research that needs to be done when putting a campaign together, isn't it?
Yeah. So because this book got a little bit delayed by a few months. I just wanted to get the campaign launched. I didn't pay attention to anything, and then at the same time, we've got this global crisis and fuel, and people are short on money, and I didn't pay attention to any of that, and then just blindly launched. And look, it's going well as of now. We've got a week left, and I have confidence it'll get there in the end. But again, it has been a learning experience. My biggest fear with this one was honestly just there's other artists involved, and I felt I didn't want to let them down because this isn't just my project anymore. It's theirs, is something they're a part of. So I have been way more nervous about this one than I would about something that is just me, because if it's me failing, it's me failing. But I just suddenly feel this, like, I want to protect them.
the need to succeed, right?
Yeah, and I don't want them to feel like they've been part of something that was, didn't do too well. But look, again, like, the work is there. I'm so proud of the book, what the artists, and so the artists involved, I should mention, I'm just saying they, but so in terms of interior artists, we've got I've done 3 stories. Then we've got Johnson Benjamin, who I've mentioned, and he's got this very sort of like fusion of like a scratchy, a Frank Quitely, Jeff Darrow, but also like a Katsuhiro Otomo sort of style. Those are his influences. So he's got one of the more sort of horror themed stories. Then we've got Steffels, who's a Melbourne-based artist. She's done this sort of more comedic, very like manga heavy story. And then Gentle Coda, who's a very well established manga artist based in Perth. And she's just released her next project, Aniline, for free on Instagram. So she's done a story there that is a bit more, her style is a bit more melancholy, very quiet and moody. So I picked just something that matched each of their strengths. And then we've got a pin-up gallery. So basically over the past year, in just hunting for interior artists, I've met all these people at zine fairs, conventions, who I wanted to involve in some way, but I couldn't afford to just keep adding stories. So I was like, I'll do a pin-up gallery like any other anthology has, and have this sort of diverse range of artists. And it was also a way to add a colour segment to the book. So we've got some mostly Aussie-based artists. A friend who I've sort of gotten to know over the last couple of years, Vero Stewart. She's based in the States. She's the odd one out. But I just knew when I stumbled on her work on Instagram, she did this really cool self-published Big Barda sort of fan zine comic that was just incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty cool. I've seen that myself, so yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I got her because the plan was to keep it Aussie focused. But I'm like, who cares?
Yeah, that's right.
And then pretty much everyone else is Melbourne-based. We've got Gwangi, who's got some comics in the local section here in All Star Comics. Paul Borchers, who recently moved here, he's got his comic Ginger Origins and Flying Malcat. My wife, she's an incredible artist, and she's contributed to a few of my books. So Lauren Bajorek, she's got a book pin-up in there. Simo, or 1-800 Simo, she goes by, graphic designer and artist, and zine artist. Paulie, who's also... I met this little crew of people, just quick tangent, just in the zine scene, and I found they all sort of knew each other, and you go on their Instagram and social media, and they're all really supportive of each other and really enthusiastic and really positive. And what was interesting, like had more like interaction on their social media than people who have like tens of thousands of followers. You know what I mean? Like it was just, they were all really passionate. And so I met Simo at Festival of the Photocopier 2 years ago now, I want to say, maybe only a year. And it was because she bought my comic. And then in following each other on Instagram, saw she does zines and was doing a zine fair. So I went to that to see her stuff. And then through that met Paulie, and then through them met Haley. And there's all these people suddenly that all know each other, all friends. And I found their enthusiasm and positivity really infectious. So yeah, those three all have pieces in the book. So Hrafen, incredible anime and manga artist who I met at Animaga last year. Okay, yeah. So Hrafen has a free web comic / manga called Ephemeris. That's like this crazy sort of like, I don't want to say psychedelic, but just it's like starting from the beginning of time with like space and stars and then animals going through Earth's history, and it's just one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And he's just got it up for free on the internet. So I just knew I wanted to get him involved. So yeah, I've just got this amazing talent base on this book that has just been such a fun project to be a part of, because basically for the last year, at least not a week has gone by where I'm not receiving a piece of art in my inbox that is just like pushing me forward. And that's how I kind of want to continue making comics.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, and look, and that's obviously a compliment to you as well, because you know, if you're producing work that is inspiring people that want to collaborate with you, then that's, you know, there's also got to be some props to you for the work that you're doing as well. Well, we're really grateful for your contribution to the Pulp Culture podcast. We you know, there's not a week that goes by where you're asking us a question or pushing us forward, or you know, helping to support us. So you know, we're always happy to reciprocate, and especially being a local talent, we're definitely we've definitely backed the book. You can maybe tell us whereabouts everybody can find you on socials, and also the Kickstarter, and go from there.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much only on Instagram, because Twitter / X is a hellscape. But yeah, so I'm Benji's.stories on Instagram. And yeah, the Kickstarter's running. It's got 1 week left. We're at 91% funded. So I've just recently added some new rewards to sort of push it over the edge. So there's some original art, both of mine and Paul Borch's. His original pin-up piece is available. And I'm also offering a bit of a self-publishing school, one-on-one interaction, because while I don't necessarily feel confident, I think if people want to make a comic and draw a comic and write a comic, you know, you can give advice, but I think people got to get there in their own way. But I think one of the aspects I am confident with myself in knowing about over my experience this last 6 years is not like self-publishing, printing, the shortcuts and things not to do. I find when you go to a lot of these conventions, you see people selling a comic that have printed at Officeworks for an astronomical amount because it's full color, and it's an 8-page comic that they're charging $30 for because they're just trying to make money back. And you don't have to do that. There's just so many ways to get around that, which I won't tell you here because you can you can back the Kickstarter and find out from me in person. So yeah, look, there's a lot of wisdom coming from this interview, and if you are looking to get into publishing, back the Kickstarter, and then you can have a one-on-one chat with Benji in regards to that. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, Benji, and special thanks to all staff for allowing us to huddle up in the kids' corner and have this interview. Thanks once again, Benji. Thanks for having me.
Like what you're hearing? Tell your friends. Follow us on socials at Pulp Culture Pod. And if you're feeling generous, drop us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.